again to the HR Exchange podcast. My name is David Rice. I'm the editor of the HR Exchange Network, and as always, your host for the day. Joining me today, I have Wil Shelton. He is the author of The Silent Agreement and the president and CEO of Willpower Integrated Marketing. Welcome, Wil.
Oh, thank you so much for having me today. I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. So you've got a new book out called The Silent Agreement, and it takes a deep look at some of the things that Black Americans face as they go navigate their way through corporate America. And a central theme to the book is really centered around boxing, and there's a lot of analogies that play out there. Tell us a bit more about your experience in boxing and how it has inspired you to create this book that focuses on corporate America and leadership.
Yeah, as a kid growing up, I was a big boxing fan and I became like an unofficial boxing historian. I've always used sports analogies to explain the world, to explain business, and to explain life. Life is a fight, and that's a metaphor for boxing. There's a fight in life you have, there's a personal fight you have all, daily, and Black executives have a big fight in the ring of corporate America. And how the book came about was there was a lot of articles I wrote last year during the social unrest, during the George Floyd murder, and the protests. So companies began to ask me to speak with them about diversity and inclusion and standing up in solidarity. So basically, the book starts out like this. Mike Tyson, in his prime, in the 80s, he used to knock out most of his sparring partners. But every once in a while, he would get one, David, that he couldn't knock out. He would resort to holding and clinching. His trainer, Teddy Atlas, told him, Mike, you got to stop making a silent agreement because one day you're going to get a guy who's not going to sign the contract. And that's what happens, David, to Black executives when they go into corporate America. They usually find out the hard way that the other side won't sign the contract. But what happens is they don't stop fighting for those top C-suites and those top promotions. They start fighting with less intensity, and they start throwing what I call don't hit me punches. And that results in fighting not to lose instead of fighting to win, just waiting for the conflict to be over. And they usually become psychological contortionists, twisting themselves in knots for the illusion of inclusion.
Yeah, you used a great phrase there to segue. The book's subtitle is An Illusion of Inclusion in Black Corporate America: How to Fight with Conviction and Avoid Broken Promises. I read that and I think that it speaks to a lot of the frustrations around the authenticity of D&I efforts and the reality of the way the corporate world has actually brought Black employees into leadership dynamics and lived up to the promises of equality and equity in the workplace. Do you feel at this period of time over this last year with so much momentum behind social justice causes, is this starting to lead to some actual change in these areas, or are we still falling short?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there is some change incrementally, but I think we're falling short because corporations need to stop being so highly adjusted to the injustice and dig a little deeper to understand how to recruit, mentor, and value Black professionals to help reap the benefits of their contributions. There's still deep-seated attitudes that may even be consciously, not even consciously held. Many minorities and Blacks feel pressured to create what I call facades of conformity, suppressing their own personal views and values to fit in with corporate ones. Blacks feel like they're constantly looking over their shoulder for the purveyors of sabotage. Those are some of the things that we need to overcome, before we really get to where we want to get in this fight in corporate America.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned earlier a phrase, you said, don't hit me punches. And, there's a sections in the book dedicated to things like the bob and weave and being on the ride side of the ropes. So take me through some of that kind of language and how you've been able to use these analogies and apply them to corporate life.
Yeah, sure. I have a couple of every chapter is a boxing analogy. Ringside seats, punching above your weight class, how to be a champion. But the chapter about bobbing and weaving is really good because um, diversity and inclusion is kind of elusive also. And corporations are become highly adept at bobbing and weaving. It's kind of a defensive move that helps a boxer avoid punches while moving closer to their opponent. Black executives turn to bobbing and weaving to escape nonstop blows that are coming their way, to maintain their balance and uphold their original stance, to keep them from being thrown off balance and making themselves an even bigger target. So whether in boxing or in corporate America, how a person executes the bobbing and weaving tactics often have to do with whether they're fighting out of fear or fighting to win. So what I recommend the tactic of bobbing and weaving is often it's to become more flexible, more adaptable, and learn how to build those their own networks outside of the company walls to gain support that they need to withstand the punches.
That's good advice. You know, now when we look at this book, not to use another boxing phrase, but it doesn't pull any punches, it seems. One of the questions I had was, how important was it to you that this conversation be as real and as raw as possible, and particularly at this moment in history?
Yeah, David, you get nowhere until you get real. So there's been what I call a truancy of transparency. And those companies that show the transparency and honesty, because there's always been a vacancy for it, if they take occupancy, they have nothing to lose and everything to gain, and things will never change until those who are unaffected are as outraged as those who are affected.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things, we're talking about DEI as part of this, right? And that's kind of part of that is getting everybody to kind of understand and be as outraged as you said. Now, a lot of companies are looking at DEI right now, and many seem to be asking themselves those difficult questions and engaging with employees from demographics that have largely in the past been marginalized. Now, the question is now what comes out of all that, I guess. I would assume that the fight that you speak of continues the same either way, but do you have hope that this is a period of time in history where real change is happening and perhaps future generations won't have to fight quite as hard, or maybe at the very least the fight is the same for everyone?
I think the fight, you're going to have different parallels, different levels of fighting. But I think the fight for future generations is going to be about having to fight harder at fighting smarter than really just fighting harder. And fighting with more conviction, and it's the inner battle that we must conquer first, so that we're not fighting the wrong battle on the wrong battlefield. And we must always believe that we can be the champions in corporate America.
Yeah, that's interesting. You brought up the inner battle, and I think that's something that has to be understood maybe a little bit better. Everybody's carrying around certain traumas and just certain things that have affected them on a personal level as well. So I guess my last question is, when you speak to people about the book, what are some of the typical reactions that you get? Do you find people are more up to this fight than maybe they were 2 or 3 years ago? I think maybe the last year has really reinvigorated everything.
Yeah, I think people are more up to the fight than they were a couple of years ago. I think especially the corporate global brands, because they recognize that Black consumers are looking under the hood. They're asking the question, is your solidarity solid or is it symbolic? Does your stance line up with your stats? They're looking under the hood. They're holding these companies and corporations accountable, and they're voting with their $1.4 trillion buying power. So these corporations have to start fighting for real, authentic diversity and inclusion in their companies, where it's not just like you're asking someone to come to the party, but then you don't ask them to dance and you don't even let them choose the song or the partner to dance with.
Yeah.
And also, I think the fight on the side of the Black consumer and the Black executive is stronger than ever, because it's, I think there's a currency in their fight now that's on their side, and they understand that they're able to be more nimble and more agile and to ask for what they want and to hold these companies accountable. I think that they're really up to the fight now, and I think they're going to keep their foot on the gas going forward. And I think this book is going to help, both all nationalities and all the allies that really want to help this change come along to where it should be, and where it should be really normalized, not just you have a lot of first, this is the first CEO, this is the first female CEO that's running a Fortune 500 company. We want to see where that's so normal that you're not even saying it's the first anymore.
Absolutely. It should just be that happens. um, well, Will, I want to thank you for joining me today. This is a really good conversation. And everybody, I do encourage you to check up a copy of The Silent Agreement by Wil Shelton. I think I'm going to dig into a copy pretty soon here. So, Will, thanks again for joining us.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no problem. And one more thing I want to tell the audience is we may not get everything we fight for, but everything we get will be a fight.
Excellent. That's good advice. All right. Well, until next time, everyone, stay safe.